Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me again for part two of the race war video that I started. So I'm going to pick up where I left off. Another form of warfare is chemical warfare. Now, when you look at chemical warfare, you start thinking about, weapons of mass destruction, things like that. And there are certain chemicals that are classified as chemical weapons, and there are also certain biological agents that are classified as biological weapons. And I guess those classifications exist for a reason. Either one of them can either cause mass casualties or epidemics to where people are ridiculously sick, and in a way it cripples them. Excuse me. Ooh, excuse me. So even though heroin, cocaine, crack, meth, LSD, all of the street drugs don't qualify as chemical weapons, by definition, in a sense they are. Drugs have not only crippled certain communities, they've not only crippled certain communities, but medically wise, they have really, the casualties are ridiculous. We're talking about children born with mental defects, mental illness, even physical defects because of what their parents were on. We're talking about people who have lost their minds because of the drugs that they were on. You know, some people in not even just in urban cities, but anywhere, you know, you can be in a rural trailer park and you may see, like zombies, people on meth or whatever, just in zombie mode. You may see that in the urban cities. You know, and it's not like it's by accident. It's really not like it's by accident. We have, we purposely have federal assets in place to address the drugs that come in and out of the U.S. You know, these cartels, and I'm not even really blaming the cartels directly because, you know, this business is allowed. You know what I mean? If you've been following the news lately or recently, there has been a ship that brought in like a couple $1 billion worth of drugs. I believe it was owned by J.P. Morgan. And you have to be really confident with your assets to trust $1 billion worth or product worth more than $1 billion. You know what that tells me is that stuff comes in through that port all the time, all the time. If you look at the surrounding areas, well, Philadelphia in itself is it has a ridiculous drug problem. Cross the bridge and go over into Jersey, ridiculous drug problem. Go up to New York, ridiculous drug problem in the whole area. So it's no secret that a lot of drugs is coming, or well, it is a secret, but it's not a surprise that a lot of drugs may be coming through that port, maybe coming through the ports in, up in New York. And we have assets in place for this. We have the Coast Guard, which, you know, I honestly truly believe that the service members themselves are doing their job, and they're doing a pretty good job. However, it's not the service members that determine where they're going to patrol, what area of the sea or the ocean or whatever that they're going to patrol. A lot of those shots come from higher up. we have U.S. Customs, and in some cases, Port Authority police at a lot of these ports. And I understand that, with as much stuff that comes in, they can't check everything. If they wanted to, they could. If they wanted to, they could. If we can increase the number of ICE agents and the number of Border Patrol agents and invest in billions of dollars for a wall down at the border, and the cost of all of these raids that the ICE agents are doing nationwide, and deploy U.S. military forces to the southern border, we can afford, more assets, better assets at the ports. Even if we had to increase, our Coast Guard, and have them at, every single port working with U.S. Customs, Border Patrol, especially since they all fall under DHS anyway. But we could, and that's not what's happening, So the drugs are getting past the Coast Guard. I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying it's getting past them. It's getting past U.S. Customs at the ports. It's getting past local law enforcement authorities who may be at the ports. It's getting past the state authorities when you're talking about traveling that stuff across state lines, Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, Maryland, whatever, wherever it's going. And then the local authorities. And it's crazy because you have so many people locked up for drug offenses, whether it be possession or use. But, they're not catching the big dogs. They're not catching, the real kingpins, the people who are really behind this stuff. And the reason being is that, if you really want to be true about it, the people who really run the show are above the law, But that is a form of chemical warfare, and it has devastated families, communities. It has devastated the economy drastically. There could be a lot of working people making a lot of good money. Yeah, we be upset about taxes or whatever, but I mean, we be making money, we be working. We could let our children play outside without fear of something crazy happening. Because of desperate people, desperate neighbors, or whatever. So pumping the drugs into our neighborhoods, allowing that stuff to come into the U.S. Is a big deal. And I know that somewhere, I'm not going to speak out on things I do know in regards to who, what's bringing that stuff in, who's bringing it in, who's responsible or has participated. But the fact is that a lot of that stuff is being allowed in here. You're not missing, be it weekly or even daily, $1 billion shipments. And you're gonna tell me that that's the first one that you caught, the first major drug bust that you've, caught in that quantity. Somebody's trafficking that much drugs on a regular basis and is getting past U.S. Customs on a regular basis, past the Coast Guard on a regular basis, past local and federal authorities on a regular basis. That's not by accident. In addition to that, in the urban areas, more so in the urban areas, you have liquor stores and bars like every other corner, almost every other street corner. Again, that's not by accident. I've gone to different suburban areas, and I've struggled to find a corner store, let alone a bar or a liquor store. Not saying that they're not out there, but they're not in. There's nowhere near as many of them in the proximity of the suburbs as it is, in the urban areas. So now you're pumping drugs and alcohol into the urban areas. And the fact that it's being allowed, the federal government not addressing this accordingly. Like I said before, we have assets in place. You know, the Department of Homeland Security itself is responsible, you know, for that stuff coming in here. Not saying that they're bringing it in here, but you know, a lot of what they do is checking and stuff. You know, immigration and customs, people coming in. You know, equipment and stuff like that coming in, things that are being shipped. You know, I mean, how secure do you feel if they could say, you know, hey, we can't track, you know, drug shipments coming in, you know, well, you can't track bombs or terrorists coming in either, obviously, you know. So, I mean, it's one or the other. You know, we've done an outstanding job finding terrorists. You know, we've done an outstanding job stopping potential terrorist threats. You know, big props to those law enforcement and intelligence personnel who did their job in that case. But in this case, you know, our government is purposely dropping the ball. We have the FBI, we have ATF, we have DEA, we have U.S. Customs, we have Immigration and Customs Enforcement. You know, we got a lot of federal assets that are available, and in many cases, their job is to find this stuff and prevent this stuff from coming in. You have local cops who are focusing on street dealers, you know, or excuse me, like local narcotics units, you know, being a part of the police, sheriffs, state police, or whatever, you know, whose narcotics units are primarily focusing on street level dealers, you know, and our prisons are full of street level dealers, you know, but as long as there are desperate people out here in need of work, in need of finances, there's always going to be a dealer. And as long as there are desperate people who aren't getting ahead, and those with mental illness problems and other stress problems and things like that, there's going to be people who use those drugs. You know, the approach that we're taking is not working. It has not worked. You know, you locked up as many black people as they could. I'm gonna just be direct about it. They locked up a lot of white people too. You know, but you know what I mean? If you really understood the drug game a little bit better, and there are those who do, you know, if you put a crack rock down and you put, you know, some cocaine down, is in a lot of cases, there are times when that crack rock has less cocaine than what's present, you know, right there. And you can get busted for having a decent amount of cocaine on you and serve less time than what is in it, you know, than the possession of that crack rock. Well, certain people did crack rocks, you know, more so than others. Certain people did cocaine, you know, more so than others. You know, cocaine was a party drug, you know, for a lot of wealthy people, and it still is. You know, I could point I could point the agencies in a lot of different directions to look, and I'm pretty sure they already know. But then you had people who were hooked on crack, and that was mostly in the urban minority neighborhoods. And if you look at our prison system, those are the people who are locked up. So it hasn't solved anything. You know, we haven't addressed mental illness. We haven't addressed, you know, various forms of PTSD that these children suffer from. You know, whether it's witnessing their friend get killed or witnessing their dad get killed, whether it be due to street violence or a police officer shooting them. There are a lot of traumatized children out here who live through this stuff every day, and we have taken no real steps to address that. You know, and technically that could fall back on the psychological part, you know, of what I was explaining in part, you know, in part one of this video series. But yeah, wow, I actually jumped ahead of myself. Okay, so the FBI isn't doing their job when it comes to this. The DEA isn't doing their job when it comes to this. And what I'm gonna go into next more so involves the ATF, but you know, guns and drugs usually tend to go together. You know, so ATF is slipping and doing their job, and I'm gonna address that next. You know, there's a lot of federal agencies We're paying these tax dollars, and that's not even including our intelligence agencies. Our intelligence agencies, that's their specialty, is to know who these people are, where these drugs are coming from, all of their assets, so on and so forth. Anybody who's an enemy of the United States can be targeted and taken down, and a number of different type of warfares, whether it be direct action or something like this that just brings them to ruins. But we're not doing that, and someone should question why we're not. So another, I'm not sure if this is really a type of warfare, but it definitely goes hand in hand with warfare, is genocide, through chemical warfare. You've poisoned a lot of people, you've locked up a lot of people, you've ruined a lot of families, which the trickle down effect has led to a lot of people dying, whether it be by suicide, by murder. We have the drug wars. So the drug wars tend to bring about violence. People die, people end up missing, and then you get people who are accustomed to killing people who kill other people just because of a dispute. If you know anything about the urban areas, there are kids out here who commit murder over, shoes, things like that. So with the psychological part of programming thugs, programming murderers, programming gangsters, busting your gun, all of that crazy stuff. On a psychological standpoint, and then on a chemical standpoint, where those same individuals could be drunk off of alcohol on a regular basis, and I mean it's pushed in their faces, it's right there, drunk off of alcohol on a regular basis, or high on some kind of drug, which may be a hallucinogen, on a regular basis. It really all sets the stage for somebody to go crazy, and to do something that they have no business doing. Add to that the countless guns that are in these urban cities. Countless guns. Now, this is a big part of ATF's role. That's their thing. When it comes to, firearms, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, they've added explosives and all that stuff. But, I'm focusing on the firearms. It is ridiculous. Guns in urban cities outnumber the people. And a lot of urban cities are huge cities. Guns in urban cities outnumber the people that live in those cities. That's ridiculous, and you're not hearing about major busts. You're hearing about these stop and frisks like in New York, where maybe 6% of the people that they stop are caught with handguns. That goes into racial profiling, something I'm going to talk about on another video. But you have the chemical warfare aspect, you have the psychological warfare aspect, to include the media, where you can, I don't want to say coerce, but kind of convince people that, yeah, you belong to this set, you belong to that set, whatever, and then they're fighting each other and killing each other on the street, for drugs and stuff, or just for turfing. It's stupid. And then you have the unjustified killings with law enforcement, killing unarmed black people. And I do want to put this out, for my African Americans out there and, my Latinos. Just because a person is unarmed does not mean that they are not a threat to those officers. However, in many of these cases that have come to light, it is clear as day, clear as a crystal, as glass, that the police officers murdered those individuals. It's clear as day, and I'm not saying in all cases, but in many of these cases, we definitely have a right to be upset. And then also we have to take responsibility for our own actions. We're out here killing each other, We're out here selling the drugs to each other. We're out here purchasing the drugs from the knuckleheads that's convincing us to poison each other. Hey, you're desperate, you need money, I'll pay you to poison your own people. You need help poisoning your own people, you hire other people to help you poison your own people. I'm gonna hire this person to do the same thing. Y'all can war all you want. Y'all can kill each other all you want. Because he's making a couple more dollars than you. So all of this stuff is economically related. Which is why I bring it up. But that has its casualties. People overdosing, people being murdered, people losing their minds, and becoming pretty much, I guess, the people out on the streets that at some point can't do anything because their minds are completely gone. And then you have the people who are locked away for the majority, if not all of the rest of their lives. They might as well be dead, So, I think, it's safe to say that that's a type of genocide, And then you have educational warfare. In a lot of these urban cities, and even out in the rural areas, low income rural areas, a lot of these teachers aren't being paid right, and they're not motivated, they're not motivated in a lot of cases to deal with the kids in these communities. And the kids in these communities, many of them are suffering from traumatic experiences. Many of them have witnessed murders. Many of them have probably committed murders themselves, or have seen something or have had close calls. I've witnessed quite a few things in my youth. And then a lot of these kids have their parents stripped away from them, locked up. Some of these kids go through the system, in foster care. Some of these kids have been sexually traumatized. And you expect low-paid teachers to deal with these students who have mental problems, physical problems, all these different problems, and the right resources aren't there to help them. Which is why I believe I've addressed part of that in another video. You got the education in comparison to upscale communities, the schools in the upscale communities is not the same education. We should be questioning that. Why, are they getting a better education in certain areas and our kids here, are kind of being pushed through the system? It doesn't make sense. They're closing down public schools in a lot of urban areas. I have seen that a lot of charter schools are opening up, and there has been some controversy over that, which I might go into in a different video. I'm not sure. Libraries have closed down, and even places like youth clubs, YMCA's, places where the kids can go and stay off the street after school. Those places have closed down, and without teachers properly teaching these kids, and without parents even understanding, a lot of that stuff, and add all of that other stuff in there, it, is a setup for failure, So this is part 2 of the race war, class war, and I will be dropping another video on this topic as well, just to close it out and to throw a couple ideas in there as into solutions. Thank you for your time.